Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. I'd like to talk about dice mechanics because of course I want to talk about dice mechanics. Who else would talk about dice mechanics than me, basically? The first roleplay game I ever played, I was probably 14 or 15 years old, so 30 years ago, and I was playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay with my friends James and Andrew and Jim, and occasionally a few others as well. And it was a new experience. I loved it. I'd been into Warhammer 40,000 specifically for a while, painting and collecting orcs, then Eldar. Eldar stuck with me forever. But then Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was something that just absolutely captivated me. I loved it. And even back then, I was thinking I'd love to make my own roleplay game and just make it just the game I wanted it to be. Later on, I actually ended up working for Games Workshop for 7 years, and I'd frequently have role-playing evenings with my colleagues there. So we'd be playing Call of Cthulhu, Battlelords of the 23rd Century. If you don't know Battlelords of the 23rd Century, it's a chunky book, well worth it for the read. I actually have a mega corporation in the game. If you go to the mega corporation section, I have to find where it is. I think it's page 567, 467, something like that. I'm going to find this now. Yes, 467. There is a mega corporation named after me in the official book, because I kickstarted it. I picked the option where you can have a mercenary company or a mega corporation named after you. I picked a mega corporation, and if you've ever played this game or get a chance to read the book, it's easy to work out which is the best of the mega corporations. I have the smallest of the top 50 named after me, but it is certainly the most awesome. But anyway, what those three games all have in common is percentile-based dice mechanics. So your core mechanic is based on rolling percentile dice. With Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, there are a number of different modifiers you add and subtract to your roll. The current iteration of Call of Cthulhu just has checks against your skill, and if it's difficult, you halve your skill. If it's extreme, you divide by 5, I think. Very simple mechanic. Battlelords has a lot more modifiers in it. There is a significant amount of maths to do for anything in Battlelords. Now, as someone who is actually a maths teacher, this is not something I mind. I can do this incredibly quickly, but I realise that it has a slowing effect on game mechanics. So it might not be the best game for every table, though it is something I've enjoyed a lot. Later on, I played games with dice pool mechanics, things like Vampire the Masquerade, Adventure. I've currently played a couple of games of Outgunned with some friends of mine, and that's a real fun system. They all use dice pools, different kinds of dice pools. Vampire and Werewolf use D10s. Outgunned has its own special flavour of dice that it uses, but you can just use D6s. What's nice about Outgunned is you roll your dice and you're looking for sets, pairs, triplets, quads, and how well you do is based on how many of those you have. So very simple mechanic, quite fun. I was actually quite late in the game getting into D20 systems. I played a little bit of 2nd edition AD&D a long time ago, and kind of skipped 3rd and 4th and got into 5th shortly after it came out. And I've been enjoying 5th edition for a long time. But out of those 3 mechanics, you got percentile, dice pool, and D20. I'm going to say that dice pool has always appealed to me more. No, that's not true. Dice pool hasn't always appealed to me more, but it appeals to me more now. I particularly like the Star Wars system from Fantasy Flight Games with their special storytelling dice. I looked around. I have a big box of them for when we played face-to-face, and They're great fun to use. They have lots of different symbols on that are a little bit confusing to start with, but you get the hang of them quickly. What's really nice about the system is that there is no fixed difficulty, that the difficulty is set on a number of dice, and the player adds those difficulty dice, to their pool when they roll. So you're rolling successes on some of your dice, then you're rolling failures on the difficulty dice. And if there are more successes than fails, then you pass. If there's more fails than successes, then you fail. There's also advantages and disadvantages. So I can't remember the terminology they use, but little bonuses and little setbacks. So you can succeed with some bonuses and spend the bonuses on additional effects, or you can succeed with disadvantages where you get to succeed, but maybe something small negative happens. And of course, you can fail with advantage and fail with disadvantage as well. It's a really nice system. The symbols take a while to get used to, not too long though, and you do need specialist dice. This actually comes to quite an important discussion for dice pool mechanics. Do you need to get specialist dice? I remember buying sets of polyhedral dice when I started playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I had plenty of D6s, and back under 2nd edition Warhammer 40,000, you did need the other polyhedral dice as well. It wasn't entirely D6 based. But when I started role-playing, I saw the advantage of having more sets. So I got more polyhedral dice, and as a Dungeons & Dragons player, polyhedral dice are useful all the time. If you want to start a brand new roleplay system, one question you have to ask yourself is, how much stuff do I need to get? How much stuff do the players need to get? If it's using common dice that most gamers would have a set of already, and if you've got an entirely new gaming group, then maybe one person already has a set of dice they can share. That's great. If you need one book that everyone can use, well, that's fantastic. Star Wars needs specialist dice. So when we first played it, the DM had a set of the specialist dice, and eventually I wanted to get my own set as well, so we didn't have to share dice all the time. And I was thinking to myself, like, how many of these dice do I actually need? So one set probably isn't going to be enough, even for a starting level character, because your dice pool will be big enough that you need more dice than comes in a set. So I should get 2, but if I really max out this stat, then I'd need a 3rd set. So I got 3 sets of dice. And that's okay, because I could afford them. I was in a position where I could afford them. For a new player in the game, you could make do with 1 set of dice and share it between a whole table. So I think getting some specialist dice isn't too much of a barrier to entry. When you're playing, if you can just get a book, there's freely available resources you can print off, things like character sheets and reference cards, and maybe 1 or 2 sets of specialist dice. I don't think that's enough of a barrier of entry to prevent specialist dice being useful. A lot of people are very purist when it comes to this, and if it doesn't use regular polyhedral dice and D6s, they'll say that's too much. That's an opinion that I disagree with, but other people are allowed to have. Up to you. So what system do I want to use in a game that I'm going to make, that I want to make, that I've had rattling around inside my brain for years now? Well, it's a dice pool system, and I want to have it so that you're having different dice, so that as you level up your character, not only are you changing how many dice you're rolling, but you're changing what the dice are. So mechanically speaking, with a dice pool system, there's lots of things you can vary. The number of dice you roll, you can change. That's the most common thing that I've seen for dice pool systems. You have a skill and a stat, you add them together, that's how many dice you roll. There's also changing the dice that you roll, whether they're polyhedral dice, regular numerical polyhedral dice, or custom dice. The fact that you can have different dice with different balances of probabilities and successes and failures or numbers means that changing the dice that you're rolling can also affect the outcome of a skill test. And then possibly the result you need. Playing Scion, you need to roll an 8, 9, or 10 on a d10 for it to be a success. But as you play higher level games, 7, 8, 9, or 10 counts as a success, with 10 counting as 2 successes. So changing what counts on a dice as a success or not is a possibility. And then there's other things like how many successes you need to succeed. I think I'm going to go for a dice pool system with action points, so that you're rolling custom dice, and the values you roll give you a number of, I don't know whether action points is the word I want to use. They give you a number of points that you can spend on doing things. So they're not going to be regular dice. And they're not going to be numbered 1 through n for an n-sided dice. They're going to have a number of points on them, then those points you spend to do things. I don't want a system where you're having to add lots of dice together. I talked about this extensively in my Fireball Fiasco video, but if you're rolling a big handful of dice and then stopping to add the numbers together, that's not so great. I'd rather have a system where you roll your dice and go, okay, I'm going to spend this dice to do this. I'm going to add these dice together, and that will allow me to do this. At no point do you have to add everything up. So reducing the amount of mathematics is quite important to me. I've said that before, but as a maths teacher, I need to point out that I love doing maths, but probably not everyone else enjoys it as much as I do. So custom dice, dice pool mechanic, action points. What else do I want to say? Okay. I really like gaming pieces. I really like player aids. I like tokens, tactile things that you can touch during the game. And one idea I've had is for plaques. What do I mean by plaques? If you've ever played poker or seen poker played, you've probably seen or played with poker chips. But for some games, particularly Baccarat, instead of using chips, the players use rectangular slabs with values written on them. These are called plaques. If you've seen James Bond gamble in any of the films, it's very rarely they use chips. They're using plaques for this. And they're about that big in size, slightly rounded edges. I like the idea of building challenges using those plaques. And you have plaques that are the challenges themselves. So let's say you wanted to smash open a door. The door has 3 plaques representing its physical resistance. You roll your dice, and the points you get, you use to bash in part of the door. And you might not be able to do it in one go, but you roll your dice. Okay, these points allow me to bash in the door this much. That's great. So you remove that plaque. It's been removed from the gaming area. And then as you continue doing the checks, you remove all the plaques. And once all the plaques are removed, the obstacle is cleared and you can go through. Fantastic. Other plaques could represent hazards. So maybe the door is trapped, maybe the door has an alarm, various things that could cause some sort of detrimental effect, possibly damage, possibly something else. If you want to bypass those hazards, you have to spend your action points to remove the hazard rather than to succeed the challenge. And that's okay. If you're a very skilled character, in this case a very strong character, you might be strong enough to just bash your way through everything, not a problem. On the other hand, if you're not so capable, are you going to spend your action points to mitigate the hazard, or are you going to spend your action points to succeed in the task you want to do? This level of choice in an action is what I'm going for gameplay. How do you spend your points? Do you spend your points to succeed or keep yourself safe? In addition to that, there could be obstacles. So you've got the challenge itself, you've got hazards. Obstacles are just things to make it harder. an obstacle could represent a particularly well reinforced door. So it's just something to slow you down. If you were climbing a cliff, an obstacle could represent it being harder, poor wind conditions. If you're searching a room, an obstacle could be the fact that it's dark. It's just something that makes the task harder. But you might have equipment that mitigates this and makes the task easier. So your equipment is on another plaque, and you can add plaques to it. So you can I'll spend a couple of points, and I'm going to add to the bashing the door down, I'm going to add to the fact that I've got a crowbar, and that's going to make it easier. So I'll spend 2 points, and that will to unlock the crowbar and to add this plaque. And the crowbar says gain 5 extra points in trying to bash something open. Well, that's great. So now I've got a net of extra points. I can't use the crowbar unless I have enough points to activate it. But by activating it, I gain more points than I spent. So what this means is if you roll really badly, you can't even use the gear that you've got. I mean, this would represent a fumble. So even if you've got the right gear, if you roll absolutely terribly, something bad's still going to happen. But if you roll okay, your gear is going to make it better. So with the plaques, you can spend points to take away things slowing you down, or you can spend points to add them that will help you. Now, the last thing we can do is we can flip the plaques. The plaques are two-sided. In the case of things like challenges, if you flip a plaque, you'll get some sort of bonus. This represents a critical success. So if you've got enough points to flip it instead of removing it, something good's going to happen. With hazards, for example, if you flip a hazard, instead of it causing a negative effect, it causes a positive effect. With obstacles, if you flip an obstacle, instead of making it harder, it'll make it easier for your next attempt. So what we are doing is we are adding, removing, or flipping plaques. FRAP, flip, remove, add, plaque. There we go. I have struggled with this acronym. I had it with flip, add, remove tiles, but I think that is an unfortunate way to go. So FRAP, flip, remove, add, plaques. The thing is, these plaques are something physical. You have one for each of your abilities. You get one for each bit of gear you've got. So just like in a casino, you've got a little box of these plaques in front of you, and you pick out the ones you want to use. Instead of gambling with them, you're adding them to a skill check. And whenever the games master is setting up a challenge, they will put the plaques down representing the challenge from a box of plaques they've got. So this boss fight, for example, these are the plaques that you have to remove to hit the guy and cause damage on him. This is a lot of stuff. I like games with stuff. I like having this idea of having this little box of plaques, and these are the ones that I'm going to use. Is this a barrier to entry? It doesn't have to be, because there's so many different ways you could do this. At the highest end, if you want to charge people a lot of money, you can have quality ceramic casino grade plaques that look and feel amazing. I've played games with good quality ceramic tokens, and it's fantastic, but they're expensive. You could have them made from pre-punched card sheets. So a sheet of card printed on both sides, a die comes along, cuts the pieces. It's just like you get in a board game. They are a hell of a lot cheaper than the ceramic plaques, but they're still not free. You could have plastic ones, printed plastic tokens. Fantastic, that's great. And if I was to do this, I'd also have a PDF of everything that's downloadable for free. So if you don't want to spend the money on the game, or you can't spend the money on the game, you have access to the high quality images that you can just print off, or make hand copies yourself, up to you. But there's a free version. Then there is the slightly nicer version that comes in the box set with the card, or if you want the luxury version, the plastic ones. And if you want the super luxury versions, there's ceramic ones that look and feel amazing, but they're definitely pricey. This would allow me to have the product at different price points. There is a free version. You can download the basic rules for free. You can get all these plaques for free. If you want to play the game, all you really need is a set of the dice. And you don't have to pay anything more than that. But if you love the game, if you think this is fantastic, you want to spend a lot of money on it, you can buy the fancy hardback book with a leather binding. You can buy the deluxe luxury dice set. You can buy the ceramic plaques, and you can have a truly luxurious gaming moment. But that's a distraction. That's a side piece. I want to talk about the actual mechanics themselves. My thoughts on this have changed drastically over the last few years. Some things have remained constant, some things have varied. I'm fairly sure that I want each skill check to draw on 4 sources on your character sheet. So you have your ability score and your skill, and you pair them up as necessary. They're not always going to be tied together, though some pairings make more sense. If you're wanting to do a computer hacking check, then intelligence and computer hacking seems to be like the logical pairing. If you're wanting to bash down a door, then your strength and some sort of athletic skill, that makes logical sense. But they don't have to be rigidly tied to each other. Even in Dungeons and Dragons, it normally suggests charisma persuasion. Though perhaps if you were trying to seduce someone with dance, maybe charisma performance or even dexterity persuasion could be good. I want a system like that where you can be relatively flexible pairing skills and abilities. I'd also like some sort of super strength or epic ability. This first edition Scion did that really nicely. So you'd have strength and epic strength, dexterity and epic dexterity, and every dot you took in an epic ability gave you some perk as well. The game that I have in mind is quite, I don't want to say superhero-y, but you definitely have abilities beyond what is normal in our world. So having some sort of super strength or epic speed fits in. So you have your regular strength, your epic strength, you have your skill. And finally, you have player level. The game has a degree of meta built into it, that the characters that you're playing know they're in a game or a simulation to some extent, or fully know and embrace it. The actual setting for this, I'm going to leave blank for now, but it makes sense in the setting that the people know that they are in a game or simulation type world, and their player level represents their ability to exploit the way this world works. Think when you're in the Matrix, you know which rules you can bend and which rules you can break, that sort of thing. So you draw on these 4 things every time you make a skill check. Now, initially, I just had those 4 things all go from 1 to 12. You have dice for each one, so you could be theoretically rolling 48 dice. And I thought that's a terrible idea because, firstly, it's a real pain to get the right 48 dice together, having to roll them all, having to check them. Even for low-level characters, rolling 12 dice each time is going to really slow things down. So I thought I've got to have a lot fewer dice being rolled. And of course, the Fireball fiasco taught us that the more dice you roll, the closer to a bell curve your results are going to be. So whatever dice I end up using, they're going to have to be very heavily asymmetrical, high variance dice. So my thought is, if we're rolling dice with action points, each dice is mostly going to have very, very low scores in it, and then just a few high ones. So that when you're rolling, even if you're rolling 5 or 6 dice, there is a chance that you're going to come up with a very, very low result or even 0. But mathematically, the average results should be okay for you. So how can I reduce the number of dice that I roll? I still want to have these 4 different things to call up on, but I don't want them all to represent a dice pool. I thought, what else can we do that could be interesting? Well, the Star Wars roleplay game has a really nice system where you have 2 abilities. You have so you have 2 things you look up. You have an ability and a skill. And the higher number tells you how many dice you roll, and the lower number tells you how many of those dice are the better one, because there's a standard dice and an enhanced dice. So if you were doing strength brawl, if you had strength 5 and brawl 7, brawl is a higher number, so you're rolling 7, so you're rolling 7 dice. And your strength 5 means that 5 of those dice are the better ones, and the remaining 2 will be the standard ones. I like systems like that. So I was thinking the 2 largest numbers from those, which will almost always be your skill and your regular ability. They tell you how many dice you roll, and the second one tells you how many of the dice you upgrade. But I want to do it slightly differently. My current thought at the moment is that your dice get better the more you have. This is a big tangent here. This is a very unorganized collection of thoughts, if you haven't figured it out. When you have a dice pool system and you roll more dice, each dice that you add is proportionally less valuable than the first dice. If you're rolling 2 dice, adding 1 more dice makes you 50% better. But if you have 10 dice, adding 1 more dice makes you 10% better. So this 3rd dice is a lot more valuable to you than the 11th dice is. And in some games that might work out. That might be fine. You're still adding the same result in absolute terms. 1 dice better is 1 dice better. But in relative terms, it's not as good. Maybe I want to have a system where each dice you add is better. So that if going up from level 2 to level 3 is good, but going up from level 7 to level 8 is even better. How could I do that? Well, let's make the dice better. As you add more dice, it changes what the dice are and makes them more effective. So, for example, maybe the first 3 dice, level 1, 2, 3, are D6s. The next 3 dice are D8s. The next 3 dice are D10s. And the next 3 dice up to 12 are D12s. Now, obviously, I'm not using regular dice. They're going to have action points on. They're going to be custom dice. But the shapes remain. D6, D8, D10, D12 shapes. So my thought is the first 3 dice are D6, the next 3 dice are D8, the next 3 are D10, the last 3 are D12. And they'll have different values on them, so that the D12 dice are going to be much more valuable than the D6 dice, more than twice as valuable. So adding on this extra dice will be better because it's a larger dice. It has more action points to spend on it. And the second thought is, for the second ability, the second highest, it tells you how many of the dice get upgraded. But you upgrade the best dice first. So let's say you're rolling 3d6 and 3d8 and you had to upgrade 2 dice. Well, you'd have 2 upgraded d8s. And this is what I'm struggling with at the moment, the maths of this. Do I want all the upgraded dice to be the same? Because if you upgrade if you've got 3d6 and 3d8 and you upgrade all 3d8, that's great. And then if you upgrade one of the d6s, instead of having an upgraded d6, you also have an upgraded d8 for that. That means that the reward for upgrading a 4th dice is even better, because it's not upgrading it from a regular d8 to a special d8, it's upgrading it from a regular d6 to a special d8. The problem with that is that you would end up rolling all the same dice. So if you had 6 and 6 in your 2 highest abilities, the first 6 would be, okay, I'd normally roll 3d6 and 3d8. The second 6 tells me I upgrade all those 6 dice to the special d8s. I don't like that. I don't like not having that variety of dice included anymore. So when I'm swimming, when I'm going out for a walk, whenever I have spare brain cycles to operate, I'm thinking, what do I do with this second ability that upgrades dice? Because I've got different dice coming in from my first ability, and I'm upgrading some of them with my second ability, and I don't want them to be all the same. I want each upgrade to be more valuable than the previous ones, but I'm not sure how to work it. The third and fourth ability are not going to give you more dice. My current thought is that you have two standard dice. Like everyone gets these two dice for free, and then you get a number of dice based on your first ability, and some of them are upgraded based on your second ability. As skills and ability scores go up to 12, the largest number of dice you'd ever roll would be 14, which is a lot, but it's not too unmanageable. Ideally, it'd be smaller, but this is sort of end game play, and that doesn't happen. Well, that happens quite a lot, but the play gets reset every campaign. So, not the characters, the play gets reset every campaign. So we tone it back down and build it up again. But for the third and fourth abilities, how can I make them useful? Well, the thing about high variable dice is that it makes rerolls even more important. So maybe this third ability is how many rerolls you get. So if you've got a high skill, you get lots of dice. And a high ability, a lot of those dice are upgraded. And then you've got a high player level. Fantastic. Now you get some rerolls. Rerolls, easy to implement. That's the good thing for this. And then the fourth ability, I'd probably tie the fourth ability specifically to the epic stat. So for the other three abilities, the highest value tells you how many dice you're going to roll. The next highest value tells you how many you're going to reroll. How many you're going to upgrade. And the third highest value tells you how you're going to reroll. If you've got a really high player level, but you're not skilled in this area and you don't have a particularly high ability score, maybe your character level is going to be the highest value, and that will tell you how many dice you roll. On the other hand, you could be at a lower level, but this is your specialist area, so you've got a high ability score, high skill, so you're getting lots of dice, and lots of them are getting upgraded, but you've got a low player level, so you don't have many rerolls. That works. For epic abilities, you get a plaque. You get a plaque for each epic ability, and the higher your character level is, the higher your ability level is, epic ability level is, the better the plaque is. And this is something that you can add to checks. So there will be a cost associated with activating your epic ability, but there will be a very, very large reward. If you completely fluff a skill check, you might not have enough action points to activate your epic ability. What this means is that an epic ability isn't an auto success. If you score enough action points to activate it, you're going to get a lot of skill points back, and it's worth doing, but you can still fumble the roll. You can still roll so poorly you can't activate your epic ability. That's actually something that happened in first edition Scion. Your epic skills gave you an automatic number of successes, but you had to roll at least one success on your regular dice before you could add those automatic successes in. So you might have 6 dice and plus 4 successes, but if you roll no successes on those 6 dice, you can't add in those plus 4. I thought that was a really nice touch because it didn't completely take away the chance of failure. You had to at least succeed a little bit, and then you could add your auto successes and succeed a lot. So with mine, you've got the plaque associated with your epic ability, and there's a cost to add it to the challenge, but it comes with a big reward. So we're still adding these plaques in. One nice thing about these plaques is that maybe there could be removable chip places inside it. So you have a plaque for epic strength, and there's 2 spaces for the chips. One space tells you how much it costs to activate it, and the other space tells you how much you get in reward for activating it. So you wouldn't have to have a separate plaque for each of the 12 levels for your ability, at times however many ability scores there are. You can have one for each ability score, and okay, this is my epic strength plaque, and you put in the right chip for how much it costs, and you put in the right chip for how much it's worth. So those are my current thoughts. Like I said, they're disjointed at the moment. I really need to think about this, and I enjoy thinking about this. When I'm in the pool swimming laps, my watch is counting the laps for me, and I'm just working out dice mechanics in my head. When I'm going for a walk, I have a real quandary where I'm going for a walk. Do I listen to an interesting podcast, or do I put music on and think about this? And I've been doing an equal mix of them at the moment, and I'm really enjoying it. But that's the thought. How do I handle the second ability score? The second score. The first score tells you how many dice you roll, and those dice get better as you roll more of them. D6s to D8s to D10s to D12s. That's 4 different dice, 6, 8, 10, 12, yep. 3 in each, that's a maximum of 12 dice. But how do I handle the upgrade? Because I don't want it to limit the type of dice you use, but I want them to get better. Do I handle it so you upgrade the worst ones first? That doesn't seem like much of a reward. There's a way to do this. I'm trying to think of different ways that I can do this. And if you have a player aid, there's got a track, you follow it. These are the dice that I take, and these are how I upgrade them, so that it's there in front of you and it makes sense. I'm fine with that. I don't want a really complicated system where you're having to look up tables and stuff. It should be something you could look down and go, that's how it works. Easy. But I'm still thinking. And I might be thinking for days, weeks, months, who knows. I may scrap the whole system and start again. I have done that when I've realised, oh, this is too many dice, it's ridiculous. This is too complicated. It requires too much effort to do a skill check. I want a game where skill checks are fun and gamey. They are part of the game. It's not a you pass, succeed, you fail, do something else. There's got to be choices and decisions. So I'm okay if a skill check takes a few minutes and adds some narrative element to the game. There's some gameplay elements for the players to engage with. Sometimes in Dungeons and Dragons, if there's a locked door, it's like, I'll try a lockpick, pass, the door opens, fail, you don't do it. Well, okay, then we'll do something else. For this, every skill challenge worth rolling is a story worth telling. And that's the kind of game that I want. Anyway, that's enough of me talking about dice. Like I said, I've still got things to think about. And if you've made it through this much of me wittering about dice mechanics and plaques and adding and removing tokens and everything, well done. So thank you for sticking with me. If you have questions or suggestions, do let me know. Like I said, I love different game mechanics, and I'd be happy to take ideas and suggestions from you guys, and see what you have to say. So thanks for listening, and enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.